Hello and welcome to this video on double flowering species. This is a somewhat unique nomenclature amongst the flowering species that you might use for bonsai. There are various qualifiers used in naming species: variegated, ornamental, hybrid and more. These all have their particular meanings. For this video we will focus solely on what double flower or double flowering means. While it might seem odd, the name does largely mean what it says. The flowers of these cultivars have more petals than normal, not necessarily double, but certainly more. While this is not a new phenomenon by any stretch of the imagination, it is also a rather difficult trait to develop. Largely that is because a double flowering cultivar is generally sterile. This means you either need to take cuttings, graft, or otherwise propagate your double flowering species via non-sexual reproductive means. The sterility is a result of turning the sexual organs of the plant into more petals, which is how they develop their extra petals in the case of some double flowering species. It is fortunate that not all such examples are sterile. Double flowers will occur a number of ways, but throughout most instances it's going to be a mutation in the genes of the flower. This is what will cause the stamen in the flower to be replaced by petals. It's weird in that it does this. Imagine if you had a third leg, for instance, as a male. The organs, rather than developing into the sexual organ, is replaced with something known as a homoeotic mutation. They are recessive, so you'll need both the two different plants involved in producing the offspring to have this mutation before you get the double flower. There are a handful of species where the trait is dominant, but these are the exception rather than the rule. The exact process involved is somewhat technical, but the short and simplified version is that there is a gene called agamus. This makes a protein, and that protein is what results in the development of stamen and carpel flower segments. These are what are your sex-reproducing parts of a flower. When both of these are missing, the plant has this part of the flower that no longer has any signal to develop into anything particularly, so it picks up the signal to turn into more petals. This would then mean that if you had a flower with a lot of sexual reproductive stamen within it, you would get a lot more petals developing. And this would be an interesting phenomena purely from a pragmatic point of view, if you were able to reverse it, for instance, and be able to use it for something like saffron, where only the stamen is used. Other than possible trivial applications, the changes to the flower are also somewhat different in its structure. Notably, if you have a double flowering species, you can get what is best described as a recursive sepal-petal-petal pattern, the sepal being the very center of the flower. In theory, you could turn any, let's say, given species of flowering species into a double flowering variety through genetic modification if you were to take the ABC model of flowers, where you have A-class genes that are responsible for the sepal and petal formation, B for petal and stamen formation, and C for stamen and carpel formation. By targeting either the B or C class, you could result in the stamen turning into more petals. This would, however, carry some big issues, notably the obvious issue of sterility, and therefore the genetic modification of the flower to get this nicer flower is, well, a rather dead-end study, as you can't go any further with the species. This doesn't mean that those that have occurred somehow naturally are any worse off. Some of those can be propagated by seed, but a lot can't. This is one reason why double flowering species are a nice option for bonsai, as they will make a much better display than a regular species. The flowers are bigger, more pronounced in color, and to a certain extent a better display. The downside is that you can't propagate them any way that involves sexual reproduction, so you can't really get new varieties or cultivars from these. There's just no way to make that happen. They don't reproduce sexually, so you can only rely on cuttings and hope for mutations to occur in that plant. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.